Welcome back to the Environmental Psychology Groningen podcast. I'm Traci White, the communications officer with this research group. And the idea of this podcast is to hear from different academics and researchers who are working in the field of environmental psychology here and to learn a little bit more about what their research topic is. And our guest today is a postdoc. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me, Traci. My name is Lisa and I'm a postdoc here at the Environmental Psychology Groningen research group. I work with Thijs Bowman and my topic here is about energy transition. So how do we transition to more sustainable, renewable resources, especially in terms of household heating and cooling systems, but also what part in this all does the behavior of individual people play a role. I also have expertise in reducing plastic pollution and health psychology as well.
So a wide spectrum that's kind of gone into the work that you're doing now in different ways, but the main focus is grid and energy transition.
Right now, yes.
Yes. And speaking of transitions, this is very smooth. We ask every guest to bring a plant with them that has some significance, and it was a little bit of a struggle for you to find a plant that had...
I apologize.
Not everyone who studies environmental psychology is always a green thumb, but you have a living plant here that we can share, and I will not break. It's this little guy.
I'm so sorry.
It has leaves, so it has clear signs of life, but what is the story of this particular plant? Where did you get it? How long have you had it?
So I moved to Groningen in November 2022, and some people that I knew were actually moving out of Groningen, and they had about 200 plants at their home.
Wow.
So they were trying to find them a home, and they're like, how many do you want? And I was like, I can take 10 maybe, or something like that. And they said, choose what you like. And I don't know anything about plants, so I said, please give me something that doesn't require a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took some, and there were the two little guys that I decided to bring to work, because in our office, the plants were neglected already.
Oh.
So I thought maybe I'll bring something new, and this time I might not,
Kill it.
kill it. Yeah. So yeah, and I brought two little ones. The other one is unfortunately on the demise.
No longer on its way out.
On its way out, and this one is still struggling, and I'm not sure. They said it's easy to take care of it, but apparently,
It's still here.
Yeah.
So,
and out of those 10, I think about 30% are no longer with us.
But this one is here, and I think a theme that's emerging with the plants is that they're symbols of resilience for a lot of people. They're in the work environment.
I like that.
They're dealing with the circumstances around them. I'll put this back down here for now. And so as you mentioned in your introduction about your expertise or your research topics, that part of what you've been looking into currently is the role of the grid within the energy transition. But people use that term, the grid, a lot. But what are the actual components of that? What are people referring to when they're asking about what the grid is?
Well, I think when I talk about the grid, what I mean is the whole energy system. So pretty much, where do we take our electricity from? Where do we take our gas from? So it can go from like a really big levels, let's say international or national levels, to then the level of, let's say, municipalities or certain energy plants that be it some sort of power plant, or maybe it's a solar park or whatnot. And then they go to, for example, individual transformers that then put the energy into different neighborhoods. And then there's, of course, household level. All of that I call grid. Somebody might disagree with me, but from psychological point, I think that's a useful term for us. If you ask an engineer, they probably will go more into technical details of what grid is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because all of these topics that our group researches, they could be looked at differently from different disciplines as well. And is there an interdisciplinary aspect to some of the work that you do on this topic?
Yes. So the project that I'm working on is actually focused on trying to bridge the disciplines of engineering and psychology. So we are trying to find a way that we can speak about the grid and its functioning in a language that we both understand, which is really difficult because obviously they speak more technical lingo, and we do, when we say about what we do, they also, have a question mark
like speaking different languages.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is what we're trying to do, and kind of incorporate the knowledge that we have together.
So then that's one potential challenge of the interdisciplinary nature of finding sort of the same language. But what challenges are posed by the transitions that are happening within energy? It's necessary from a climate standpoint, but do those sustainable technologies in people's homes, is that a bigger challenge for the grid than the current electricity situation?
Well, there's obviously a whole bunch of challenges that the grid is facing currently. And, for example, one of the recent ones is the energy crisis that happened after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So when the electricity bills skyrocketed and suddenly there was no gas that could come to the European part, for example. And then, where do we get the energy? And of course, for example, here in Netherlands, there's a lot of, you can see windmills everywhere. Yeah. There's solar parks, all the houses have solar panels on them. But it's not enough. Mm-hmm. So for the whole country, it's not enough because Netherlands and also other European countries are very heavily gas reliant. So that's one of the challenges on the grid. But then on the other hand, so we do need a very quick transition to renewable energy sources. So we don't have to rely on gas the next time the energy crisis hits. And it will hit again because this one we had just now is not the first one, right? So they're going to keep coming.
Yeah, it's kind of cyclical through history that
exactly
they recur.
Yeah. Plus, obviously gas and other fuels are finite resources. So, we will run out of them at some point. So the transition to more sustainable sources is urgent. So we need to do it. However, for example, if all of us would have solar panels, when do solar panels produce energy? When it's sunny, right? So when it's sunny, a lot of energy is produced by those who have solar panels. But you can't use that amount of energy because it's just too much energy. Even if you put all of your appliances in the house on a sunny day, there's still excess energy produced. Yeah. And so most of this energy is actually shared back to the grid by the people who own the solar panels. And that's where the grid overloads. So actually currently grid is not capable to deal with this amount of energy that goes back from the solar.
And that's just the input and not even about trying to save it or conserve it anywhere.
No, the problem is that the batteries that can potentially store this energy are really expensive. It's a really difficult technology, and also they are made using finite resources as well. So currently it's a little bit of a problematic area, let's put it this way.
There's a mismatch.
Yeah, and the same goes for wind energy. If it's a windy day, you have a lot of energy. If it's not a windy day, you don't. So obviously there is such thing as geothermal energy. So for example, geothermal energy comes from the underground sources, or it comes from the tides. So this is something that is pretty much stable. Yeah. However, the technology can't provide, for example, the whole of Netherlands with energy currently.
Like to scale, I guess, is the issue.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, that's the problem right now. And also the problem is, so again, when we have a sunny day, we have solar panels. What we need to do is we need to then put our dishwasher on, put our washing machine on, preheat our water if we have a heat pump. But most of us are at work or at school or something. So, of course, we then come back home and then we do all our laundry or our cooking and everything and use energy in this time. Mm-hmm. So these are the peak times for energy consumption. And obviously the grid is overloaded again, but in the opposite direction.
Right, yeah.
So there is the question of like what we as individuals can do in order to actually kind of help the grid adapt. And that's what I was talking about before, is that we are a part of the grid. So because we're users, we are the ones that ultimately use the grid. And it's, so I think that's a very important point here.
Yeah. So users are also a component of the grid. It's not literally just about the technology. It's also about the people who are putting the demand on the grid in terms of their energy consumption. And within environmental psychology, one of the things that the group looks into quite a bit in the context of climate change especially is the role of individual behavior in influencing that. So you're saying it's a little bit of a skewed demand in terms of when there is the most energy and when there's the most demand for it. But then how can people's behavior help to sort of make them meet a little bit more in the middle?
Well, for example, what I mentioned before is if we change a little bit how we do things at home, right? So most of us now own appliances that, for example, you can pre-program. So, for example, so that your washing machine or dishwasher starts in the middle of the day. If it's a sunny day, you can pre-program it in the morning. And then, for example, buying energy-efficient appliances, something not everybody can do.
Right.
And then, of course, like we have a lot of inequality in this sense, and energy poverty being when we struggle to pay for our electricity needs, for our energy needs at home. But for example, there's also some things that in long term, they seem like big investments. For example, putting good insulation into your house. So it is a big investment. However, now there's some subsidies available for that from the government. And if you think about how much that will reduce your actual electricity bill in the long run, then the saving is actually, much better. It's just that we lose sight often of what is far away from us. Mm-hmm. So the habits that we have, if we adjust them, they can help. And also now, it's very popular to have automation of some sort in your home. So when you pretty much have, the big app, smart home, where you can program everything. Yeah. So of course it's more fancy and more expensive, and not everybody can have that. But hopefully that's the future of the energy system. Yeah.
So a lot of those interventions that people can take, they do depend, like you acknowledged, on the financial means to do so. But
of course.
But subsidies are there to help with that. But are there any sort of blind spots right now that you have seen in the research that you've been doing where there could be more support or more information given to people about the things they can do, or should it even be focused on what individuals can be doing? Is that also a bigger part of the conversation for people?
Well, I think so. For example, one thing that we've been working on is when the energy crisis hit, the government in a lot of countries, but in that, I'm going to talk about Netherlands. So they implemented a policy where people would get a €190 one-time payment for, I think it was November, December 2022.
Like the peak months of heat usage during the winter. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty much your energy bill minus €190. So you can pay your bills easier. And then from 1st of January 2023, the government introduced the ceiling on gas prices. So that means that the price on gas cannot exceed a certain amount. I don't quite remember what the number was, but so that means that your energy bill cannot exceed a certain amount. At the price.
There's a cap on it.
Yeah, there's a cap on it. And so these are really good policies that help people actually deal with energy poverty in some way. And however, the problem is that we did a study, for example, that we actually asked people some questions before the cap was implemented and after the cap was implemented, after their first energy bill. And we observed that people, before the energy cap was introduced, they were motivated by mainly financial aspects. So of course we understand it's a matter of survival, right? So in Netherlands in winter you can't not heat your house.
Yeah.
And there were so many articles where poor students have to be like putting all of their clothes on and still like, you know, being really cold and uncomfortable in their household.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not only uncomfortable, it's actually dangerous if you
Yeah.
can't afford to heat your home or to cook or whatever.
Yeah, and the rebate didn't even necessarily qualify. That didn't even include students. So that was also
exactly.
an oversight. Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, like financial motivation is very strong. However, in psychology, we also know that financial motivation doesn't really work long term. So you can give people subsidies, discounts, initiatives, and it does have an effect. So people do change their behavior. People, do that. But once the initiative is gone, the behavior is gone as well. So it's a very short-term solution. So ultimately, when we talk about pro-environmental behaviors, so behaviors that are doing the environment good, which is also energy-saving behaviors at home, then we a lot of times there are financial incentives for that. But what we ultimately are looking for is why are the people doing this in the long run? Of course, finances are important, but if you do it because you know that you're saving the environment, you're saving the finite resources, you're actually chipping away at that problem, that might give you a much more long-term motivation to do that.
Yeah.
And so after, for example, that's how these policies backfired a bit in terms of that the motivation of people to care, to do these behaviors because they care about the environment reduced after the caps were implemented.
Yeah.
That means that their overall motivation, actually, that's what we found, overall motivation to save reduced. So that means people are more likely to then stop saving energy at home, which of course is understandable because, again, like if you don't have to put all your clothes inside a home and you can feel comfortable for a little bit, like, of course, and in winter and things like that. But that's kind of, it's like not pinpointing any fault on anybody, but that's kind of a paradox.
But it also makes sense that if people have that ease of that peace of mind that they can do this without risking either physical discomfort or financial discomfort, then that makes sense. And was there any information about whether people were more conservative with how much energy their household used before or after the rebates and caps were implemented?
Well, we didn't have any information about how much actual energy they used, but we asked them about how easy it was to pay their bills. And also we asked them if they still perform the energy-saving behaviors before and after.
Okay.
So their energy-saving behaviors, they started doing them less after the implementation of the cap, which is sort of expected because then people relax a little bit and it's like, oh, I'm going to splurge and be warm for a change.
Yeah. So it ends up sort of counterproductively incentivizing less environmental behavior, even if it's meant to be simultaneously serving the financial and environmental purposes. It ends up actually people think, oh, I can compensate in some way with this money I have and then behave in a different way than I would otherwise. Yeah,
and it's, again, like this is crisis, right? This is a matter of survival. So, like, of course we want people to survive and be able to afford energy bills.
Beyond comfort, it's a matter of life or death in some cases. So of course that's maybe slightly different than if we wouldn't have an energy crisis at hand. But again, this is happening and this is going to keep happening. So And you had mentioned that the subsidies and the price cap, that those were government policies, that those were issued from the national government. But what is the role of the government in terms of actually making it so that the grid can handle more green technologies on both ends, like the smart appliances that people have, but also the greener inputs, the sources of energy that are non-fossil based? Is that a job for the government, or is it really all about the consumers being the ones that make it sustainable in terms of it can continue existing and operating the way that it has been?
Well, of course, the consumers, we are not most of the time the decision makers.
Yeah.
It's more, there are some energy communities, but I think Goda was talking about this quite a lot. So of course, like, it's not only on us, and I know we've had a lot of questions directed at us about, like, why do we have to do anything if it's the corporations and the governments that have to do stuff?
Right.
Which I definitely don't disagree with. However, about between 40 and 60 or 40-70% of electricity or energy is dependent on the consumer. So that's how much we can actually save by changing consumer behavior.
Well,
however, again, consumer behavior. If we don't have money to do improvements to our home, what do? Right?
Yeah.
So I think that in terms of policies that the governments could do is subsidize home improvements, such as installing insulation, installing double glazed windows, heat pumps. So for example, where I live now, I'm renting a place, but it's an experimental location for Warmte Stad, which is initiative in Groningen to implement district heating ultimately in the whole city. But I am lucky to be the one in the experimental neighborhood where, so before the kind of ultimate rollout of the whole program, they asked this particular neighborhood who wants to be a part of it for, I think it was either for free or for like a much reduced fee. And so my landlord went on board with that. So that's a really good policy, because then, you can get ahead of it in a way, because otherwise people would have to pay for it somehow. So that's a good one. And then, for example, I know that some governments offer some sort of subsidies on installing insulation in your house. There's subsidies on, for example, using electric vehicles as well. It's not quite household consumption, but things like that. And for example, there is a policy here in Netherlands that you can't build any new houses that are energy label lower than A++, I think.
Wow, yeah.
Which A++ is it the highest? Or?
I think there's a couple of pluses that it can also go, but it's high.
Yeah,
anyway.
But that means that these houses are already insulated, are induction stove, some sort of heating system that is, saving energy quite a lot. So, which I think is great, because, for example, in the Netherlands and I think other countries as well, like if you look at the city center of Groningen or city center of Amsterdam, all these old buildings, you can't really implement improvements there because they are either architectural monuments,
like protected status.
Or, for example, I know you can't dig really those streets in the city center to put new piping in, because they're a lot of very ancient stuff under those streets.
And even to have a heat pump, your house has to meet certain criteria for you to be able to install that. And most old houses don't meet that criteria. Yeah.
So, of course, this is also a question that I'm not actually sure how governments could implement that. And of course, and I don't need to kind of say it out loud probably, but doing something in terms of stopping the fossil fuel production, but I guess that's an obvious one.
In this setting, it's certainly a given, but like you said, the consistent reliability of the energy source is something that currently the green sources can't always provide at the moments where there's the peak demand. And so there is, as of now, is it true, the argument that people make that there is a need for, during a transitional period, to have energy stability a role for even the cleaner versions of fossil fuels like natural gas? Like, where does that fit within the conversation about the transition?
Well, I guess because it's called a transition, right? So it's not, we can't do it cold turkey, we're not relying on gas anymore, we're just doing renewable energy because of the problems that I outlined in the beginning. Like, there is not enough renewable infrastructure to, for example, even the Netherlands is a small country, right?
Yeah.
And we have there's a lot of wind and maybe not that much sun, but also there's the sea,
The natural resources,
Yeah, there's a lot of natural resources. So it's possible, but not right now, because we do need to have infrastructure. We do need to be able to optimize this infrastructure so it actually works with, utilizing what we currently have. And also we as individuals need to change our behavior as well. Because if technology is there and we're not using it right, then also, what's the point of that?
And if people aren't being empowered to use it, because if the technology's there, like heat pumps or more modern insulation methods or more energy efficient appliances, but the fact that maybe people in the back of their head know that they may end up having to pay more in the short term at some point because of the grid, is that disincentivizing people so much that they won't do it at all? Has there been any insights about that?
So I think there's kind of a little bit of everything in that mix. So some people, for example, just don't know about alternatives that much. So, I didn't know what a heat pump was until quite recently, or district heating or things like that. And also, for example, I didn't know that induction stove is so much better than electric stove in terms of energy saving. So I think there's just maybe not enough knowledge on that. So of course, providing people with information about this is good, but as we know from environmental psychology, information itself is just not enough. Because okay, but I can't afford it.
It's all well and good that these things are there, but if it's not something that you have the money to implement, then it doesn't do any good. It may make you feel guiltier or even more helpless potentially.
Yeah. So I think in this way, this is one of the issues there, but also I forgot what I was going to say.
There's lots of issues.
What was your question again?
About if people are made aware of the technology that's out there, but they're not in a position to actually implement it, does that further demotivate them? Or does that play a role in their decision making in some way?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense, but it's kind of an additional step in the process of people thinking, well, there's the technology and there's subsidies, but everything has to kind of come together for it to really be something people can achieve and have a home where they can do those things.
Yeah. And one additional one, so for example, Netherlands is, when we're talking about cities, so it's one conversation. But then Netherlands, there's a lot of agriculture around. So if we, for example, talk about these communities there, so, you've seen there's a lot of windmills, there's solar parks. There's a lot of kind of controversy around that in those populations because, for example, they say, well, they ruin the landscape, and they also, this is the land that could have been cultivated, but instead there's a solar park in there and it looks ugly and things like that. So I think kind of maybe changing the narrative around that would also be helpful. But also, obviously, we do need to talk to people differently if they have different priorities and different values. And
just recognize there's no silver bullet blanket solution that works for everyone in every situation.
No. Also, maybe consider me a little bit pessimistic, but the first principle of behavior change is you can't change somebody's behavior if they don't want to change their behavior, right? So we can talk to people, we can provide them with information, we can provide them with tools to work. But unfortunately, not everybody will be on board. However, if you imagine some hopefully not very distant future where, for example, gas will not be available anymore as a source of energy and only renewable resources will be available, then you don't really have a choice, right? It's a policy. So like with plastic bags in the supermarkets, you can't get them for free anymore. People were upset, but then, now they go on about their daily business fine.
You adapt to the new reality.
Yeah, so obviously
Yeah.
policies are very, very strong in this regard, and probably the strongest tool, in my opinion, to work in this area.
Okay. I think that's about everything I wanted to ask you about. So thank you so much for your time. And
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Me. Thank you for joining me. And
Thank you.
our lovely producer who's doing all the technical stuff. Right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Right. Yay.